And now the time has arrived for the concluding talk of this Keep Seeking First God's Kingdom Convention. We are eager to hear all that Brother David Splain, a member of the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses, has to present in the talk entitled, Never Be Anxious, Keep Seeking First God's Kingdom.
Well, I see you've been practicing your applause. And we do have a lot to be grateful for. First of all, we want to thank all those who have had a share on this wonderful program, whether it was in talks, demonstrations, the drama, interviews, soliloquies, whatever they did. Thank you, brothers and sisters, for taking this so seriously. Now, yesterday, here at East Rutherford, it was a wonderful sight to see all of those baptismal candidates stand and pledge their devotion, express their dedication to Jehovah God. Now, for a group like this, with around 58,000 in attendance, we would say that 250 getting baptized would be a good figure. We generally calculate about 1/2 of 1% of a convention audience getting baptized. Do you think that we made it here in Jersey City? Look how positive you are. You don't even know how many got baptized, but you're clapping away. Well, we did not have 250 get baptized. Yesterday, there were 447 new brothers and sisters. That was here in East Rutherford, but I have the baptism figures for the other locations as well. And you can hold your applause until we're finished, please. I only have an hour. At Brooklyn Russian, there were 9. Columbia, South Carolina, 74. New Jersey ASL, 8. Loveland, Colorado, 22. Milwaukee, 219. Orlando, 33. Turnersville, Hindi, 2. West Palm Beach, Haitian Creole, 44. Wilkes-Barre, 35. Winston-Salem, 45. East Rutherford, 447, for a total of 938 new brothers and sisters. Welcome, all of you. Now, this convention has required enormous organization. A lot has been going on behind the scenes. The rooming department has had many challenges to face. Just a week ago, 2 hotels let the brothers know that they would be unable to house delegates. Now, a week's notice is not very much notice to find rooms for all these people, but our rooming brothers were able to handle the task very efficiently, and they were able to get rooms for everybody. Now, one large hotel was overbooked. The rooming department told them, don't overbook the rooms. God's people keep their word. If they say they're going to be at the convention, they're going to be at the convention. But the hotel didn't listen. And as a result, it was necessary to move many of the delegates from that hotel to other accommodations because there was no room in the hotel where they had been assigned. And then the hospitality committee had to rearrange the busing for them so that the buses would come and pick them up. All this was going on while you and I were blissfully ignorant. Now, many of you in New York City were taking the train up here, but we didn't know how close we came not to have a train on Friday. At the last minute, feverish negotiations had to take place so that New Jersey Transit would put the trains they promised on the track. But once again, our brothers were equal to the task. Now, this is the first time that we have used MetLife Stadium. And usually the first time we use a facility, we have a bit of a difficult time with the management and staff because they don't know us. Often they don't trust us. They won't give us keys to the place because they don't know what we're going to do. But we must say that the management and the staff here at MetLife Stadium have been just wonderful. We deeply appreciate their cooperation. Yesterday, we had a meeting with a couple of hundred special full-time servants, missionaries, and others who have been assigned to foreign branches. And they deeply appreciate your generosity because it was your donations that allowed them to come home for a short visit, get a little bit of time to visit their families and friends. So thank you, brothers and sisters, for your generosity. And we love our missionaries. We're happy to have them with us. We've also had about 2,700 delegates here from other countries. We won't call them foreign lands. They're just other countries. And you know, many of these delegates are not rich. Many of them are pioneers. They save their money for 3 or 4 years because they don't want to go on a cruise. They want to be with their brothers and sisters. And you delegates have certainly added to the atmosphere of this place. Many of you don't even speak very much English, but you came. We're happy to have you with us. Speaking of delegates, I'm thinking too of some who were not able to be delegates at a convention. There's one sister in particular that I'm thinking of. That sister was told by the body of elders that unfortunately they would not be able to recommend her as a delegate because she has mobility issues and she has health problems. The sister said, "But I've saved all my money. I was ready to go." Then she paused and she said, Do you know someone that I can give that money to so that she could be a delegate to a foreign convention? When I heard that, I thought, Jehovah has so many wonderful people serving him today, obedient, ready to obey. We just love people like that. We would certainly be remiss if we missed out the Hospitality Committee. For months and months, our brothers have been feverishly preparing for this event. Congregations in the New York, New Jersey area have got together on the weekends to prepare souvenirs to give out to the delegates and others. Then there were the performances, the local culture, demonstrations of the culture that we have here in the United States, the musical programs and so on. Arrangements had to be made to take the delegates out in the field service. A tremendous amount of work was done. We thank the Convention Committee, we thank the Hospitality Committee. It was wonderful. There's one last group that we must thank. We have talked about having all of these facilities tied in by video. Sounds simple. It isn't. It was an enormous job, and the broadcasting department in Brooklyn and the video department here on site have been working very, very hard to make sure that all of the sites were tied in at precisely the right moment. I'm sure that some of those brothers haven't had a decent night's sleep for weeks. And just when they get it all ready and the convention is over, a couple of weeks later they have to go and do it again at another convention. They're not going to see the summer. So brothers and sisters of the broadcasting department and the video department, the IT department, thank you for your devotion. You really brought these conventions close up. Well, Friday morning we received a fine clarification on the Apostle Paul's vision of the third heaven. Do you remember the details? Why was it the third heaven? Because the number 3 denotes intensity. In other words, it was the highest form of heaven. And what heaven did the Apostle Paul see? It was the kingdom. And then he said that he was caught away in the Spirit to paradise. What is it that Paul saw? Likely, he saw the literal paradise or the physical paradise, the spiritual paradise in the new world, and the heavenly paradise of God. And yesterday, we received a beautiful new book, God's Kingdom Rules. And I don't know if you really grasp the implication of this book. There are many languages that will never get the Proclaimer's book in their language because there are 650 pages to translate, and they would never have the resources to translate 650 pages. But they can translate 240 pages. And so many of our brothers are going to have a brief history of Jehovah's organization in their hands for the very first time. And we thank Jehovah for this provision. I mentioned the baptism figures, but I will give you the total, the grand total figure for all of our installations, all of our locations. I'm not going to go into them one by one, but if you're taking notes, the grand total for today is 140,257. Well done. Well, quite a bit has been said about the family during this convention. And we have another spiritual gift from Jehovah that's going to help families and their family worship evening. It's a new DVD entitled, "These Words Must Be on Your Heart." Now, the DVD is based on the live action drama that we had in 2011. I'm not going to talk about it. I'd rather show you an excerpt of what you can expect. Watch the monitors.
We all used to be so close, so happy. Somewhere, we went wrong.
Everything isn't always so black and white.
Marcus!
Let me make my own decisions, my own mistakes.
We'll talk money.
So you don't want to help him?
Hooking up it's just part of the growth process.
But how do I make it right? Rebecca, don't you see what's happening to your heart?
And now who's making excuses?
Do you really think that the mistakes that we make don't affect other people? I break my back so that you won't have to struggle the way I have.
I'm not a machine.
We'll try taking a look in the mirror.
I feel like such a failure. I sacrifice, and this is what I get.
But are you making the right sacrifices?
It's sinking in that what the kids need most isn't money or things. They need us.
You'll be happy to know that one DVD is available for each family here in the audience today. So after the closing prayer, you'll be able to collect it. And the DVD will be produced in Grade 2 English Braille labels and Grade 1 Spanish Braille labels. Now, those of us who are associated with the English language congregations know that we received the revised edition of the New World Translation, and in what we call the front and back matter, we have study material. In the front matter, we have 20 questions that can be answered by the Bible, and in the back, we have appendixes, Appendix A and Appendix B. But a number of language groups are not going to be receiving the revised edition of the New World Translation in the immediate future, but the governing body has arranged for this introductory and final matter of the Bible would be produced in booklet form. And so for those who are tied in from the Hindi, the Russian language, and the Haitian Creole conventions, that is the Hindi, the Russian language, and the Haitian Creole conventions, we are going to have for you at your location booklets in your language that include this front and back matter of the New World Translation. So after the concluding prayer, you're going to be able to obtain your copy. And any Braille reader attending the convention or someone representing him should go to the chairman's office after the session to receive a copy of the release in Braille. So we're happy for our brothers in those foreign language conventions. Well, the theme of this talk is never be anxious. And you can guess where the theme is found. You're right. It's in Matthew chapter 6. And why not turn to Matthew chapter 6? And first of all, put a ribbon in Matthew 6, because we'll be reading a couple of other places, but we'll be returning to Matthew 6 quite often. And first of all, let's just read verses 33 and 34 rather. Matthew 6, 33 and 34, because of course verse 33 is the theme of our entire convention. We read, "Keep on then, seeking first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you. So never be anxious about the next day, for the next day will have its own anxieties. Each day has enough of its own troubles." Well, that certainly is realistic advice, isn't it? People in the world have a lot of anxieties. And what about us? Do we have anxieties? We most certainly do. We have many of the same problems that our neighbors have. It has been said that anxiety is like static on the radio that disrupts a beautiful tune. It can ruin any beautiful melody. But really, what does anxiety accomplish? One of our publications had this to say about anxiety. It says, "Does worrying solve any problem? Not one." And then it uses a very fine illustration. It says, "Imagine trying to move forward by rocking for hours in a rocking chair, expending all that energy, but getting nowhere." And then it gives practical advice. It says, "Instead of worrying, some positive action on your part may produce good results. If you offended someone, you can apologize to the person, perhaps restoring good relations. If you committed a sin, you can avoid whatever led up to the wrong act. Then again, you may simply have to live through some situations of life. But worry is nothing but a form of paralysis that can leave one unable to serve God fully. And there is no reward for worry." An American humorist put it this way. He said, "I'm an old man and have had many troubles. Most of it never happened." And that's true. So often we expend energy worrying about something that will never happen. Did you ever have a disagreement with a brother or sister and decide that you really were going to have to settle matters? And perhaps the night before, you got yourself all in a tither over it, and you said to yourself, "I'll go to him, and I'll say this, and then he'll say that, and then I'll get mad, and I'll say this, and then he'll get mad, and he'll say that," and you get yourself all worked up. The next day, you go and talk to the brother. He's as gentle as a lamb. You stayed up all night worrying about something that never happened. Well, is it possible to stop being anxious? The context of Matthew chapter 6 shows that there are things that we can do, and we're going to look at a few of them, some of the positive aspects that we find in Matthew, the 6th chapter. So leave your Bibles open, and we're going to look at several verses together. First of all, let's look at verse 3. So we're in Matthew chapter 6 and verse 3. One way to relieve stress, anxiety, is by making gifts of mercy. Verse 3 says, "But you, when making gifts of mercy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." Now, did you notice what Jesus called those gifts? Gifts of mercy. Well, in order to show mercy, we have to look at our fellow man, we have to feel compassion for our fellow man, and then we have to be moved to do something for our fellow man. It's mercy. But now, when we're looking at someone else, when we're feeling compassionate for someone else, we're not thinking about ourselves. We're not thinking about our own troubles. So the very fact of contemplating making gifts of mercy can be very beneficial to us. How often do we hear of those who have serious illnesses who say that they get involved in the ministry because when they're involved in helping others, they don't think about their own problems so much. There is more happiness in giving than in receiving. Now, when we think of gifts of mercy, we cannot help but think of you, brothers and sisters, in the New York, New Jersey area. A terrible hurricane swept through here, Hurricane Sandy. Some of our brothers lost their homes. Some of them may have lost their means of livelihood. But you, brothers and sisters, came to their rescue. Some of you got right out and helped clean out their yards, clean out the property, helped them to rescue whatever they could. Others gave monetary assistance. Others were involved in the rebuilding work, so that we find that Jehovah's people are being well cared for after a disaster. And it brings us close to one another. And those who receive the help realize what a loving family they belong to, and they thank Jehovah. And this really draws them closer not only to you, but it draws them closer to Jehovah. And then think of how Jehovah has opened the hearts of his servants to keep supporting the kingdom work financially. Yesterday, we mentioned how we're able to provide publications to brothers and sisters who could never have afforded them if we asked for a donation. And that has resulted in increased spirituality. People who had very little knowledge are now elders, ministerial servants, pioneers, taking the lead in their congregations because they have been fed spiritually. And this is because Jehovah has opened your hearts and has moved you to support the kingdom work. Well, if giving gifts of mercy makes one happy, then you must be happy people indeed. Now, let's continue and we'll read verse 6. And here's a second stress reliever. Prayer. Verse 6, Jesus says, "But when you pray, go into your private room, and after shutting your door, pray to your Father who is in secret. Then your Father who looks on in secret will repay you." Well, prayer. Open your heart to Jehovah. Pour out your heart to Jehovah. You can tell Jehovah things that you would never dare tell another human being. Be honest and open in your private prayers. When you have a problem, if there's something you can do about it, pray for wisdom. If there's nothing you can do about it, if the solution is out of your hands, pray for peace. And the God of peace will hear your prayers. Once again, when we pray for others, not just ourselves, our minds are focused away from our own problems, and this helps relieve anxiety. Suppose you've had a little misunderstanding with a brother or sister. Pray for that person. Ask Jehovah to bless that person. Ask Jehovah to help you to heal the breach with that person. Don't ask Jehovah to bring that person to his senses so he'll come and apologize to you. No. Ask Jehovah to give you the courage to take the initiative to approach the person in the right way and to gain your brother or sister. Learn to love that brother or sister. Sit down and write out 10 positive qualities that that person has. And if you can't find 10, you don't know that person well enough, because all of Jehovah's people have 10 positive qualities. Well, that brings us to the next point, forgiveness. Let's read verses 14 and 15. Jesus said, "For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Whereas if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." Some carry a grudge, even against fellow witnesses, for years. We ought to be glad that Jehovah doesn't deal with us the way we deal with others sometimes. And if someone comes to you, perhaps after this convention, and wants to apologize or wants to set matters straight between you and that person, make it easy for them. You know, it's not easy for a person to apologize. It's not easy to say, "I'm sorry that I offended you." Years ago in the traveling work, I was called upon on one occasion to mediate a dispute between a fleshly brother and sister. They were both in their 60s, but they had had a terrible falling out, and they hadn't been friends for years. At the beginning of the meeting, the brother got up, looked his sister in the eye, and said, "I sincerely apologize for everything that I have done." And his sister said, "Get down on your knees, beg for forgiveness." Well, until that point, I thought it was going rather well. But she wasn't helping, was she? Make it easy for someone to make amends with you. We see some in the world who have legitimate grievances over wrongs that were done to them in the past. No question, they were mistreated. But no matter how sorry the offender is, no matter how much the offender wants to make amends, it is never enough. There is no forgiveness. They just can't let it go. Forgiveness is good for the heart. Some carry a burden over something that happened years ago. Perhaps their parents weren't in the truth, or maybe they were. They may have been unkind to their son or daughter, put them down, made them feel worthless. Maybe they always compared their son or daughter to someone else. Why can't you cook like your sister? Why aren't you smart like your brother? Now, when you ask parents about how they dealt with their children, Mom will always say, "I had 5 children, and I always dealt with all of them the same way. I always treated them the same." Then you ask the 5 children, "Who was the favorite?" They all know. She was. The parents are in denial, but the kids all know who was the favored one. Well, all right. So suppose you weren't the favored one in your family. Time and again, our publications have commented on the value of letting go of resentment. Otherwise, the influence your parents had on you when you were a child will carry on through adulthood and even into old age. Enough! Enough already! You have to let it go. Verses 16 to 18 Verses 16 to 18 warn us of the danger of hypocrisy. Living a double life is a form of hypocrisy, and it breeds anxiety. When we think of leading a double life, we often think of teenagers, but adults can have that problem too. Before 1973, the use of tobacco was not a disfellowshipping offense. Of course, it was frowned on. You couldn't be a servant if you smoked. But some witnesses did smoke. They certainly didn't advertise the fact. They'd go home, lock the door, pull down the shades, and light up. They rarely ever invited anyone to the home. They discouraged people from dropping in unexpectedly. Their children could never have their friends over. The funny thing was, everybody in the congregation knew who smoked. If you went past the house in the evening, when the lights were on and the shades were drawn, you would see the outline of the smoke behind the shades. And so everybody knew who they were. The smokers were forever chewing gum. But you know, it was really a relief for those brothers and sisters when they had to quit smoking or leave the organization. Once they'd beaten the habit, they could relax in the company of their brothers and sisters. They weren't always looking over their shoulder to see who was looking when they were doing something. The lesson? To avoid needless anxiety, don't even think about living a double life. Let's turn to verses 19 to 21 now. Matthew 6, verses 19 to 21. Jesus says, "Stop storing up for yourselves treasures on the earth, where moth and rust consume, and where thieves break in and steal. Rather, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be." A well-known bumper sticker says, "He who dies with the most toys wins." Wins what? He's dead. And who's going to play with those toys? Someone who didn't work for them, someone who doesn't appreciate them. Now, there's nothing wrong with material things, but material things shouldn't be the center of our life. It would be sad if worry over our investments or other material things robbed us of our joy during the day, kept us up at night. Many of us can testify that some of the happiest times we had were when we had very little materially. Now, verse 19 says, "Stop storing up." Many people have a garage they can't put their car in, a basement or an attic that they can't move around in because it is crammed with items that they used once and will never use again. Think exercise equipment. In time, the stuff will be thrown out. So how wise the Bible's counsel to keep it simple, as we've been encouraged to do. Now notice verse 21. "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be." Now this was alluded to a little bit in Brother Ekron's talk. We might ask ourselves, where is my heart when I'm in field service? Where is my heart when I'm at congregation meetings? You know, many of us use an iPad at the meetings these days. They're very handy, but there's a danger. Sometimes during the meeting, there might be a temptation to just check our emails. Oh my goodness, I have several. Oh, this one, I have to get back to that person right away. Oh, for that I'll have to consult my calendar, find out what I'm doing next week. And before you know it, our heart is not on the meeting. Now, I'm not talking to you from the top of Mount Sinai. I have to watch this too. We all do. But let's be sure that when we're engaged in sacred service, when we're at the meetings, when we're in the field, that our heart is in the right place, that our heart is on our work. Now, one way that we can store up treasures in heaven is by giving of ourselves in Kingdom Hall construction and by contributing to the worldwide work. Brothers, we have an enormous job ahead of us in this country to build Kingdom Halls. For many years, we had been emphasizing building Kingdom Halls in lands with limited resources. There is still a need in those lands, but some of the lands have caught up in their Kingdom Hall construction. But the fact is that we have been neglecting building Kingdom Halls in this country. Do you have any idea how many kingdom halls are needed in this country? I can't give you an exact figure. It may be more or less, but the figure that I have is 1,783 kingdom halls. That's 1,783 kingdom halls that at last count were going to be needed. Do you know how many we built last year in this country? 60. We better get our tennis shoes on. We've got work to do. And how many kingdom halls are needed in the world? 13,095 is the last figure I have. If you're taking notes, 13,095. Now, as you may have heard, a new program has been set up to expedite the building of kingdom halls. And we're going to be appointing full-time construction servants in this country. That is, individuals who are going to be working full-time at the building of kingdom halls. And of course, they will be accompanied by all of the faithful brothers and sisters who work part-time on the weekends when they can, just as we have been doing in the past. But by 2015, we are going to be needing between 350 and 450 full-time construction servants. So you young brothers, if you want to have a very happy and satisfying life, think about getting involved in Kingdom Hall construction. You will make friends that will last you for eternity. When you go to a convention or an assembly, you will know so many people because you have worked together. There will be a close bond that will be forged. Right now, we're working on our world headquarters in Warwick, and we have brothers and sisters coming in from all over the country. Brothers and sisters in foreign lands would love to come and help. But we can't have them working on our kingdom halls here in the United States. We have to do it all ourselves. But we are just delighted with the response that we have had. We need your help. So think about working in Kingdom Hall construction. Jesus gives further beautiful counsel in verses 22 to 24 of chapter 6 of Matthew. And we see how the New World Translation, the Revised New World Translation, really helps us to understand this verse, these verses, 22 to 24. Jesus says, "The lamp of the body is the eye. If then your eye is focused, your whole body will be bright. But if your eye is envious, your whole body will be dark. If the light that is in you is really darkness, how great that darkness is." Well, we see how the Revised New World Translation helps us to understand these verses. Jesus says that your eye has to be focused. Focused on what? On spiritual matters. When we're focused on spiritual matters, are we anxious? No. And then Jesus contrasts focused with envious. Remember, formerly the New World Translation says, if your eye is wicked. And we had a hard time understanding what that meant. But no, Jesus is contrasting a focused eye with an envious eye. Well, an envious eye is focused on what someone else has, not on the kingdom. This is a wonderful stress breaker to keep focused on spiritual things, keep focused on the kingdom. Let's go to verse 25. Verse 25. Jesus says, "On this account I say to you, stop being anxious about your lives as to what you will eat or what you will drink, or about your bodies as to what you will wear. Does not life mean more than food, and the body than clothing?" Well, Jesus knew that his listeners were anxious about things, and yet he tells them, stop being anxious. Is it really possible to stop being anxious? Well, first of all, What kind of anxiety is Jesus referring to? He's talking about mental and emotional anxiety, the unreasonable anxiety that disturbs our sleep and ruins our joy. I'm sure that many of our brothers and sisters who came out on the platform here were anxious. Some of them told me that they were, and yet they did just a beautiful job. There's nothing wrong with that kind of anxiety. It means that you take your assignment seriously. But the unreasonable kind of anxiety that's really not based on fact, that's what Jesus is talking about. And notice what he tells us to stop being anxious about: what we will eat, and what we will drink, and what we will put on. He isn't talking about trying to get rich. He's saying not to be unduly worried about the necessities of life. Brother Weaver, in his beautiful summary of the Watchtower, brought that very clearly to our attention, that we should put our trust in Jehovah. We need to see Jehovah as the one who is ultimately responsible to feed and clothe us. If you lose your job, Jehovah has a problem. And now, it'll be interesting to see how Jehovah solves that problem. Now, many in the world literally make themselves sick trying to make a living. They work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. They end up with ulcers, back pain, their nerves are shot. They suffer from sleep deprivation. They hardly know their wife. Their children are strangers. And often, when a workaholic loses his job, we find that his wife and children leave him. Why? Because he was working so much, the only thing that was holding the family together was a paycheck. Well, Christians view things differently. They know that Jehovah will take care of them no matter what happens. It's because we believe the assurance that we find at 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7. This is so reassuring. All of us really ought to memorize these words. They're so beautiful. 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 and 9. Actually, we'll read verse 7 first. I'm sorry. 1 Peter 5 and verse 7. Here Peter says, "Throw all your anxiety on him," that is, on Jehovah, "because he cares for you." Now that's very personal, isn't it? Peter is saying that Jehovah cares for you, and for you, and for you. He knows what you're going through. And not only that, but he is not indifferent. He cares about what happens to you. And when you pray to him, be sensitive to the way in which Jehovah answers your prayer. It may not be in the way you expect. Pray to Jehovah God, and when he sends help, accept the help. God loves you. He wants you to succeed. He wants you to be happy. And then Peter warns us of our great adversary, verses 8 and 9. He says in verse 8, "Keep your senses, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking to devour someone." We'll come back to that in a moment. But notice what he says in verse 9. "But take your stand against him, firm in the faith, knowing that the same kind of sufferings are being experienced by the entire association of your brothers in the world." Now that, verse 9, is very encouraging. Why? It means that you are not alone in what you are experiencing. Sometimes we may feel that we're the only one who is experiencing such pain, such chagrin. But Peter is saying, no. He's saying, look around your congregation. Look around your circuit. You'll find brothers and sisters who are experiencing the same kinds of problems as you are, And Jehovah is sustaining them. Jehovah is helping them. He is helping them to cope. And just as surely as Jehovah has helped them to cope, Jehovah is going to help you to cope. Because these same things are being experienced by the entire association of your brothers in the world. Now let's get back to verse 8. He tells us that our adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion. How might the devil be roaring in our lives? He may roar by means of threats from the boss. If you go to that convention, don't bother to show up for work Monday morning. I have 100 people who'd be lined up for your job. Or he may roar by means of threats from an unbelieving mate. If you go to that convention, I won't be here when you come back. Or threats from a friend who has committed a serious sin. If you tell the elders what I did, I'll never speak to you again. Or threats from an unbelieving parent. If you keep studying with those witnesses, you can pack your bags. You can't live here. Satan is trying to frighten us away from Jehovah's protective care. But Jehovah is warmly encouraging us to stay close to him for protection. Now we continue in our discussion of Matthew chapter 6. Let's go back there. And at this point, we're on verses 31 and 32. And again, Jesus says, "So never be anxious and say, 'What are we to eat?' Or 'What are we to drink?' Or 'What are we to wear?' For all these are the things the nations are eagerly pursuing. Your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things." Well, what is Jesus saying? Jesus is saying that there is no excuse to sideline kingdom interests, even in the pursuit of the necessities of life. Now let's go on to verse 33. Jesus says, "Keep on then seeking first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added to you." Do you see where the priority lies? The kingdom comes first. The necessary things are added. And then Jesus says, "So never be anxious about the next day, for the next day will have its own anxieties. Each day has enough of its own troubles." Well, going back to verse 33, Jesus says, "Keep on." It's something that demands continuous action. Now, we may have made many sacrifices when we were first coming into the truth, or when we were younger. Maybe we pioneered. What is our attitude today? Do we have any regrets? Maybe I should have gone to university instead of pioneering. Could we be thinking that we were perhaps too fanatical when we were new in the truth, or when we were younger? The Bible says, "Keep on seeking first the kingdom." But how might we apply the advice to seek the kingdom first? It may involve simplifying our life to make time for spiritual activities. Now, Jesus didn't say that we wouldn't have to work. God feeds the birds, but even the birds have to work to eat. But can we take a realistic view of the amount of money we really need and reduce the amount of time we need to work? Some have been able to reduce their work schedule from 5 days a week to 4 days a week by cutting their expenses. They prepare a lunch and take it to work rather than eating in a restaurant. They cut down on the amount of money they spend at Starbucks or other coffee places. They use the extra day they have for a greater share in the field ministry, to do personal study, or even to care for personal matters. It really relieves the stress. You can't place a monetary value on that. Putting the kingdom first doesn't even necessarily mean that your lifestyle will suffer greatly. Several years ago, I met a brother who decided to retire at age 50 instead of the usual retirement age of 65. So he asked the company, if I retire at age 50, how much of my company pension will I receive? They answered, 25%. That's all. He went home and talked to his wife. They reasoned. The house is paid for, the kids are gone. Let's just live with less, and the two of us will pioneer. Well, I asked the brother, how many sacrifices did they have to make in view of the fact that their income was reduced so much? He said, almost none. Almost none? Why? Well, he says, when I was making a lot of money, I was paying a lot in taxes. But he said, once my income went down, why, I didn't have to pay any taxes at all. So he says, everything that comes in is ours to keep. And that brother and his wife pioneered very comfortably for a number of years. Now, the last verse that we read in Matthew 6 really means take one day at a time. Each day has its own troubles, and that is beautiful advice. A longtime servant of Jehovah at World Headquarters has been applying that advice. He has faced life-threatening cancer 3 times. How does he cope? He says, I'm a realist, and I know that I can live only one day at a time. So he is involved in personal study, keeps his mind on spiritual matters, and Jehovah is sustaining him. We also learn an important lesson from young Nigel. At age 11, Nigel learned that he had a very serious form of cancer, and he had to undergo some very painful and uncomfortable treatments. But while he was getting treatments, he attended meetings, gave encouraging comments, read his Bible, and witnessed to the doctors and nurses. At one point, Child Protective Services tried to take him away from his mom. Nigel wrote a touching statement to the judge. When Nigel's mother read the statement, the judge burst into tears, and she even left the bench and hugged Nigel's mother. All of the charges were dismissed. But now here's something that's interesting. Despite learning that his condition had worsened, Nigel was conscious of helping others. In fact, when an elder went into the hospital for a procedure, Nigel called the elder 4 times to give him encouragement and to see how he was doing. Now let's consider one last point, and that's found in Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 15. And this is a real stress reliever as well. Proverbs chapter 15 and verse 15. We read, all the days of the afflicted one are bad, but the one with a cheerful heart has a continual feast. Well, what do these words mean? Well, the afflicted one looks on the negative side of things, and so his days are dismal, his days are bad. But the one with a cheerful heart is afflicted as well, but he tries to focus on the positive, and as a result, every day is a feast. Now, here are 6 suggestions that will help us to cope with our problems. Number 1, don't let anxieties over tomorrow weigh you down today. Don't let anxieties over tomorrow weigh you down today. Number 2, try to focus on the good things that have happened to you. Try to focus on the good things that have happened to you. Number 3, don't dwell on past mistakes. Learn from them and move on. Psalm 130, verse 4 says, with you there is true forgiveness, so don't dwell on past mistakes. Number 4, when anxieties weigh you down, talk to someone who can cheer you up. When anxieties weigh you down, talk to someone who can cheer you up. Number 5, avoid giving in to negative thoughts. Avoid giving in to negative thoughts. Number 6, reflect on how Jehovah has helped you to cope with past crises. Reflect on how Jehovah has helped you cope with past crises. And that will give you confidence that He will help you out in the future. Now, there's one more group that I would like to mention just for a moment, and that is our older brothers and sisters. Yesterday, I made a tour of all of the departments, and as we were buzzing along from one department to another, we saw so many of our dear older brothers and sisters. Some of them were taking painful steps, one after another. Others were pushing walkers. Some were walking up the slant, and it was hard for them. You, brothers and sisters, have no idea how encouraging it was to see you present at this convention. You could have stayed at home. You could have stayed at home. You could have said, I'm getting too old for this. It's going to be hot. There's going to be a lot of walking. And we would have understood. But instead, you came. You wanted to be here. We love you. We appreciate you. And remember this. In the world, they say, you're only young once. But in the truth, we say, you're only old once. You're going to be young forever. So you might as well relax and enjoy your old age. It's temporary. Well, the time has come for us to depart. And this convention has been an expression of the love of Jehovah for all of us. To Him goes the praise and the glory. So, brothers, as we leave this place, let's be determined to show our gratitude to Jehovah, gratitude for all His provisions, by seeking first the kingdom in our lives. Now, as mentioned, we have been very pleased to have the special full-time servants with us, the missionaries, and others who have been assigned to foreign branches and the foreign fields. And so we're going to be happy to be accompanied by these brothers and sisters as we sing the final song. So we're going to invite our brothers and sisters to come out now. Our goal was to tire them all out with all that waving. Now there's one other group that we just want to mention before we stand and conclude with our song and prayer. At Jersey City Assembly Hall, we have our brothers and sisters who are in the sign language. And so we all want to wave to our brothers and sisters in the sign language, and this is how you do it. So let's everybody wave to our brothers and sisters at the Jersey City Assembly Hall in sign language. That is beautiful. So now let's see how well you sing. We're going to stand and sing song number 91, My Father, My God and Friend. Let's stand and sing out.